Hello and welcome to another edition of MLB Pro Happy Hour. I'm joined as always by Brenton here, and Bruce is waiting in the wing to listen in, discuss all things MLB Pro. It's Tuesday, it's Wednesday. I don't even know what day of the week. It's Thursday, isn't it?
Thursday.
Thursday. Man, these days are flying by. Before we get into the big stuff, take a quick look at today's games. Houston took down Seattle 5-1 behind Melvin Gardner, moving to 3-3. Casey Kelly did not give up a home run, so Soz was happy about that. The Angels, 7 runs combined in the 8th and 9th inning to beat the Boston Red Sox 8-4. Nomar Mazara, his 7th homer. Jesus Montero, his 5th. The Texas Rangers and Cleveland Indians finished off a wild series, another bullpen beating for the Indians as Texas scored 7 runs in the 7th inning and on. Ryan Braun, Jacob Scola, and Chris Betts all homered. Light day in the National League as the Reds beat the Rockies 5-2. Martin Perez, his first win of the year. Kolby Allard got to start in that one. We're going to talk about him here in a second. The Brewers with a 4-2 win over the Marlins, Jose Santiago, his first win of the year. And the final game of the day, the Washington Nationals, and the player of the day, Mark Davies, 8 1/3, 10 strikeouts, 6 hits allowed, no runs, as the Nationals beat the Diamondbacks 5-2. And I think the man of the story, the man of the day, the man of the week is the aforementioned Kolby Allard of the Cincinnati Reds. Allard today pitched at Coors Field, went 5 innings, 6 hits, 1 earned run, struck out 7, walked 2, lowered his ERA to a tick below 4.5 through 92 pitches in what many believed was going to be a start that wasn't going to happen. Speculation out of Cincinnati said Allard was going to be moved before the start. I think there were some things that popped up and allowed Allard to start today, and I think the clock is now on Kolby Allard status here in Cincinnati. Brenton, what's going to happen? Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? If he goes, where's he going? What's your take on everything Kolby Allard related?
Yeah, I think if you'd asked me this 2-3 weeks ago, I'd have told you there's no way, right? I would have thought, we all know Scott. We know the way he values his players. We know the way that he looks at his team. And honestly, rightfully so in that division. Like, we've all kind of talked about the fact that the Pirates aren't for real this year. So who's going to take that division over? The Cardinals are off to a slow start. Despite the Reds' slow start, they can come back and win this thing. So I think if you look at it, historically speaking, there's no way Scott moves Allard. Or Allard, however you pronounce his name. But I think if you look at this year, from what I've been hearing from other GMs I've talked to, from speaking to Scott himself and speaking to you, I think there's been some legitimate offers made on Kolby Allard, and I think it's a real shot. I mean, I know he leaked something out the other day, like 50-50. I think there was a real possibility that at one point he was more 80-20. And this thing was actually going to happen until a couple of wrinkles got thrown into it and we kind of fell off. I still think before the end of the week or Sunday, there's a real chance this happens. And we start to see what I assume will be some sort of a waterfall, right? I mean, Tyler Pill isn't exactly a monumental move, but you see a guy like Kolby Allard move, especially if he goes to a contender, you start to see that reaction, right? That's always the most interesting piece in MLB Pro. How does somebody react? If he ends up in New York, no way it happens. But let's say he ends up in New York. How does Mitch react? He ends up in Seattle. How does Matt react? Those are the kind of things that I'm always fast. If he ends up in a Buckholes run team, how does the other Buckholes react? That's what I'm very interested in. So I think we're at a 70% chance he's moved. And what does this start after that? Because as great as Allard is, I don't know that he's a true number one. I don't know that he takes a team that's on the fringe and makes them a contender. He maybe takes the number 2 team in a division, takes them to competing number 1. But that second move is going to be the interesting piece to me. So I will be sitting back waiting for all hell to break loose after he is moved.
I think you're right. Having talked to GMs across the league a couple days ago, the sense amongst everyone, I think, was the same, that this was kind of like Bryce Harper a week ago. I think there was a lot of talk. But as days have gone on, and maybe it's because of the offers that have been received, and maybe it's because of the play of the Reds, I'm with you. I think we're well above 50% at this point. And unlike Bauer last week, unlike Pill, unlike some of the other names that are going to be on the block, either are on the block now or become on the block by July, this is a guy who's just 22 years old.
Mm-hmm.
It's his third year in the bigs. Some speculate he is an ace. Others maybe have him more as a strong 2. But either way, here's a guy that's an innings eater at the top of the rotation, making league minimum for another couple of years at 22 years old. So even if you do have to pay him, his contract expires, I believe, in 3 years, Kolby Allard. After the 2023 season. Even if you extend him at any point between these years or let those arbitration years come, if you sign him to a 7-year deal, you're still talking before 30 years old. So you're not dealing with these major pitching extensions that take a pitcher into his 33, 34, 35-year-old season. I think the value is sky high. But the other side of the thing is, as you pointed out, is the division. A division that Pittsburgh is playing well. I think there is still some. Is Pittsburgh as good as their record? I think most people would say no. The same with the Cubs, who I believe are at 500. Are the Cubs really a contender to win the Central? Probably not. It's still the Cardinals' division to lose. But there are many within that Cincinnati Reds organization that still thinks this is a team that can compete, as they did last year.
Yeah.
And if they make that trade, that goes out the picture.
So for the most part, yes. Real quickly, sorry, there are people waiting to be let into the room. I just heard Sam.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Here, we'll let everyone in right now.
So while you're letting folks in, I would argue that honestly, I got muted.
Sorry, no, you're good. You're good.
It says I'm muted though.
No, I hear you. Everyone's unmuted. Everyone's good.
Weird. Okay, my system is telling me I'm muted. So I honestly think that there is a chance that should the right deal come up, and I do think that deal is out there that involves a piece that's not too far from the bigs, I think there's a shot that he is able to retool with a piece that's not exactly Allard, but is a couple steps below, right? Bump Sale to that 1, which is where you should be anyway. And if he can bolster this offense, the team hits, if he can replace a guy like Lucroy, get a decent hitting catcher in there, he could still make a run at the playoffs this year while getting 3 or 4 pieces that can bolster his future to go with a guy like Hunter Green, Noah Naylor, that are already in that system that are actually pretty decent. And he's got a couple of pieces there. He has 3 or 4 more offensive pieces to that farm system. Grabs a 2 or 3 level major league arm right now. I don't see why he has to bow out of the race. I really don't. I think the talk is hey, let him run. And I know I put a piece up a couple days ago about this is his window with the age of his team and the contracts. I still believe that. I think if he deals Allard and does not get a major league arm in return, he has to make the move to just fuck everybody and sell it out. But I think if there's a realistic situation where he gets a number 3 or 4, 2, 3, 4 arm, can piece enough things together, make another upgrade on the offense, and really still stay in play here while adding some future pieces to this offense to start setting himself up for when Dustin Pedroia falls off a cliff here in a year or two, when Cameron Maybin continues the decline he's in, and all the LaCroix, again, falls apart. Like, he's already got his catcher of the future, but what happens at first? What happens at second? What happens at short? I think he can do it. I really do. It's going to come down to, will the other team be willing to pay up? And when it comes to the right point, will Scott pull the trigger? I don't know, man. I'm so fascinated by this thing. I think this is going to be one of the most interesting trade desires we've seen in a while.
Here we are, 35 to 40 games, depending on the team, having been played. If you had to put a number on it in the National League, how many wins will it take to be the second wild card spot? Last year, it was 90. What will it be this year?
Man, it's tough. You can't go higher than 90. There's just nobody.
It's going to be lower.
Yeah, it's got to be lower. Like, it has to be, right? I can't see another team winning 95, 94, 93. There's no way. Like, there's no second team in any division outside of the Central even. But even there, I don't think even the winner wins more than 90 games. So nobody in the NL East, nobody in the West, nobody in the Central. It's got to be 85.
Matt, welcome aboard. What's your take on the Cincinnati Reds here? You've been an advocate that this trade market really boils down to 4 or 5 teams. Do you think a deal gets done? If a deal gets done, where's he going?
I think a deal gets done if the trade and the offer that has been allegedly out there is real. I mean, if you're talking about 2 real top prospects and you're talking about 2, very good prospects in addition to it and splitting it between hitters and pitchers, I mean, that's as great as Allard is. They're sitting bottom of the NL Central, which is still the weakest division. you might as well take the shot. I mean, yes, they're technically, I haven't downloaded the file, but 6.5 games back, tied with the Brewers. But, fourth or fifth in that division, it's a weak division. Could they make a run at it? Sure. But at the same time, Allard's a great piece, but he's not necessarily, the game-changing piece where if you're getting a top, even if it's two top hitters and then, two very good pitchers, if those two very good pitchers are a 3, next year you target a, pitcher first round in the draft, you could be back there in 3 years.
It's an interesting spot, too, taking a look at the Reds farm system. Only one prospect in the top 100, that being Hunter Green. After Hunter Green, there really isn't much. Some have been impressed by the play of first baseman Leith Wenzel, who's progressing nicely. But beyond that, as you mentioned earlier, Noah Naylor behind the plate, Brian Owen last year, I believe a first-round pick, Alex Fido a couple years ago, I believe, a top pick, I believe. Beyond that, there's not much. And some of these other players that you've mentioned, Dustin Pedroia, how much trade value is there? Cameron Maybin signed to a big deal. How much trade value is there? Will Myers isn't going anywhere. JD Martinez, there was some speculation that he was linked to Bryce Harper in a move last week. Nothing came about of that. Jonathan Lucroy, $10 million. Is the team going to budge on that? Joel Hanrahan entered the season with value, but not playing up to his potential. That really leaves Chris Sale, Craig Kimbrell, David Chester beyond Kolby Allard. So it's a team that if they do pull that trigger, it will be interesting to see, as you pointed out, the chain of events that would follow that move.
So I have a real quick question from Matt. Matt, I have it on fairly solid authority that deal that you've been discussing, right, the 4 top 100 offer is out there, right? I've seen the prospects. I've seen at least the framework of it. If that's the legitimate offer out there, do you think that that's something that the Reds take? I mean, if there are legitimately 4 OSA top 100 prospects out there, does he jump at it? You know Scott as well as anybody. You think he makes the move?
Yeah, I mean, I think he said the other day, he follows his scout. So, while it could be 4, league-wide players that we're all in agreement are good, if he's, trusting his scout and his scout doesn't see the same thing, then maybe it's a different story. But I think if you have that kind of offer for anyone, obviously we've had the change in the rules over the last few weeks to go and kind of push towards more of a quality over quantity. There's not much better quality than you're getting than, an even split between hitting and pitching. Yep. And 4 prospects, like you said, he's a pretty aging team. His options right now are either he has to push to go all in, and I don't see that as something he's doing. I know he's been pretty reluctant to discuss Green in any trades. If that's the right choice, who knows? It's yet to be seen. But if you're not going to move Green, I don't see him getting a piece that's going to be good enough to push him, into the top of that division. I think the Cardinals are going to end up there at the end of this year. So I think if you're going to do it, it doesn't have to be a full rebuild. He can, trade Allard and come back to it in a couple of years. And who knows? I mean, Allard, I believe, has 3 more years after this. Mm-hmm. Maybe you trade him for those 4 prospects, ask for, 1 more on the side, and try and pick him up in free agency in a few years.
That's a plan. From trades that might happen to a trade that did happen today, a trade that got quite the reception in the league chat tonight when it was announced. Tyler Pill moved again. Is that his 3rd time being traded since like April 1st? Going from Atlanta to Cleveland in exchange for top pitching prospects of Cleveland's Brody Matthews and Riley Pint. We'll start because we have a member of that trade with us. What was the thought process from Atlanta to move Pill now, and were you happy, or not were you happy, because I'm sure you're happy. What's your take on the players that you acquired?
Yeah, look, I love Tyler Pill, right? I think he's one of those guys that his performance, much like Chris Gray in Atlanta, outranks his statistical rankings. I think if you look at the way the scouts rank him across the league, both those guys, they're not ranked as top-tier pitchers, right? But they both performed very well in their tenures in Atlanta. So I was happy to bring him back, honestly, when we did from New York, although I never thought we would compete this year. it was nice to get a piece back that would at least bring fans to the ball club, and I kind of thought we would deal him at the deadline. So when the Indians came asking about him, kind of on the heels of the piece that came out a couple of days ago about the Indians being for real but needing an additional pitcher, I was into it. I would like to see the Indians take down, league villain Rocky. I have no qualms about that. But
quick question.
Yeah.
Who's the bigger league villain? Is it Rocky or is it Aiden?
I think Aiden's more well liked, I would have to say. Why would you think Aiden would be a league villain?
I just think it's a divisive, topic in the league. There's clearly a feud there. It's kind of like, which of the Buckles brothers is the league villain? One's more vocal, and I definitely think that Rocky's more vocal, but I don't know if he's the league villain.
League villain's probably a strong word, but I think he's a fun person he plays that role very well. He embraces it, right? He's one of those guys that if you try to come at him, he always has a great quip. I think if you were to split the group on who is comedically on either side of it, I think you'd fall 75% on Aiden's side, 25 on Rocky's. While we all love Rocky and don't want him to leave the league, I think that's the way it would fall.
Most of us don't want him to leave the league. There is one who does.
I don't think there's anybody in this league that anybody wants to see gone. This is a very good group of 30-plus individuals, one or two, depending on how many GMs there are.
I'd be more than okay if Kaiser left the league.
I'll pay for that. That's fine. What the fuck were we talking about?
What's the outlook of Brody Matthews and Riley?
There we go.
This year, next year, what's the ceiling? What's our take on what we got?
To me, all three are flyers, right? That nobody there is a surefire starter anywhere. That you've got good stuff and good makeup from both Pint and Matthews. Both of them have solid personalities. They have solid stuff, decent movement. They have control issues. They're older in the lower levels. So there's concerns, right? But for me, dumping $9.5 million in this year's salary, it gets me back into the black, so I'm no longer losing money this year. Losing a guy like Matthew Thompson, I think is his name. I like the kid. He's a fast first baseman. He was never going to be an impact player. So a couple guys that were never going to play into my long-term plans, take some flyers on some young arms that have some speed behind it, have good stuff, and can maybe develop a little bit of control. I'm into that. Plus a guy like Gregorio Lopez, who a bit of a hothead, but definitely has a decent bat that could iron itself out here at 24 in AAA after another year of seasoning. I'm into taking that chance, right? I think this is just more lottery pieces for my rebuild here in a couple of years, and I couldn't be happier with both where Hill lands from a personal side and where my team ends up playing.
On the other side of things, Matt, you're obviously in the American League. You now not to start, I think the Astros envision, but still plenty of time to go on the year. And I think still a team everyone sees competing for a playoff spot before it's all over. What's our take on Cleveland? Is it a move that makes sense for Cleveland, a team that last year was in position to make the playoffs come the trade deadline before a late season collapse? Is this a move that made Cleveland that much better?
I don't know if you'd say that much better, but I definitely think it's an improvement. Again, anytime that you're able to put in, a sixth competent starter, you can't possibly complain about that. Right now they've got Julio Rosado, former top prospect, as their 5. But Michael Pineda and Sean Stevens have been struggling a ton. So, even if it's just spelling them for a start or two, bringing in another guy who can, reasonably pitch, deep into games, you can never complain about that. So I think it's a smart move. They sold the farm, really big this offseason when they went off after Strasburg. So they're trying to go all in. And if that's, route that they're going to go, then, this is another move in that direction.
Sean Stevens coming off of a very strong start in his last outing. You mentioned Strasburg and Swift, as good as any 1-2. We combined 12-0 and 14 starts. Pineda has been awful. But when you're I never know the correct terminology to pronounce it, but the batting average on balls in play is at 355, an increase of 140 points from last year's stint with Toronto. So if Cleveland's fielders could get in the way of balls at all, Pineda should see some success moving forward. Matt, what else was on your mind? Brent and I were discussing things before the show. What else was going through yours? What are we seeing around the league? What's the biggest storyline to you?
Well, I had a question for Brenton. You kind of talked about that last trade you got a couple more lottery tickets. I don't remember who it was the other day, but, kind of mentioned that a lot of the guys that you've gotten are good, quantity guys, and they're really, nice, maybe filler pieces, decent starters. But, there's been a little bit of a lack of, superstar talent that you've gotten back in these trades. I think there's a few guys in there. I'm actually just going through and updating my own personal database and my rankings. And, a guy like Rivera and, Jamie Vega, I think are top quality players. But at some point, what's the plan? Obviously you can't have a team of 2 stars and a bunch of role players when you've got teams like the Angels and Seattle and Toronto in this league.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, man. Like, I remember seeing that and really sitting back and looking at the squad, because there's some guys in there I really dig. I think I'm higher on Brendan Malone and Pedro Jimenez than a lot of people are, maybe. Royce Lewis, I'm a really big fan of. Brendan Rodgers. Like, there's some guys in there that I really think could be.
Let's not forget Matthew Thompson in the lottery.
That was a very interesting addition, sure. I wonder sometimes if I'm a product, if I'm like a victim of my own creation here, right? I think this rule that came about was mostly driven towards what I've created. These massive, ridiculous trades with 11 players coming back because I just sit around and wait and add another player here and there, and it just kind of grows. As opposed to looking at grabbing somebody's top player, grabbing 4 or 5 of their lesser ones, hoping they develop and hoping that my engine can work. So it's an interesting piece, man. I'll be very curious to see how this builds as we get 2-3 years into it, because I think there's guys down there like C.J. Abrams, like Matt Weaver, or Bill Weaver, some guys that are kind of right below that B to A level that if they develop a little bit, I've got myself a roster of really good players. I'm really relying on the development aspect of this game to work, and I don't know that we've seen a rebuild model for that necessarily in this league to this point work. I think we've seen it tried. I don't know that we've seen it work yet. So I'm taking a shot at that being the case without really being able to go out and get a guy like Vlad Guerrero Jr. He was never on the table for me at any point, right? He was never going to be taken. I came after Fernando Tatis, and I was told flat out, like, fuck off. It's not happening, right? So a lot of these big ticket guys, they're just who's the kid in Drew Lock in Boston? Again, another piece. Like, I was told no, flat out no, it's never happening. So it's not that I didn't go after these guys. It's I went and it never happened. So I started looking at how do I get pieces that could turn into this player. And I'm now sitting here with a bunch of dudes that are like, hey, +5 here, +5 there. I've got some really good people. -5 the other direction, I'm fucked. But I guess I'm kind of in the situation where I'm hoping against hope that this works out, and I've got enough lottery tickets out there that something should pay off. Probably not what you want to hear as a fan base, but that's kind of the situation I'm in.
Well, and obviously you'll be the second or third pick this upcoming season. That's not gonna hurt. Pour a little bit of money into the amateur scouting and find a gem.
Yeah, I think if I can pick out somebody like Vlad Guerrero from a couple of years ago and add him to this mix, I'm super happy with the middle infield of Royce Lewis and Brendan Rodgers. I like Marvin Gruen at third base. He's young enough that he should stick there long term. There's a lot of pieces out there. Like, my whole outfield's a disaster, and I think I have to find some pieces out there. I've got some young guys, but again, like you said, that they're young and unproven. They need some development. So the Braves could be the shit team of this division for years, or who knows? Maybe we'll work out great. But I'm in it for the long haul. We'll see how it goes.
Taking a look at this weekend, are there any series that stand out to everyone? Just a quick rundown of what we have. We have the Nationals taking their talents to Chicago and the Cubs. The Red Sox and Yankees renew their rivalry. A battle of 20-plus win teams in the Phillies and Pirates. The Angels head to Baltimore to take on the Orioles. AL Central, Cleveland's in Detroit this weekend. Texas heads to Tampa. Miami heads over to your neck of the woods in Atlanta. The Astros continue to host Seattle, a 4-game series. Kansas City on the road at Minnesota, Arizona in Milwaukee. Perhaps the best series on paper would be the Mets in St. Louis. I don't know if Kershaw might be lined up, but Clayton has been dynamite recently. The Reds continue their series in Colorado, another 4-gamer. Toronto heads out west to take on the A's, the Dodgers, and Padres in a battle of Southern California. And our interleague series of the week is the White Sox and Giants. What series, what games, what's everyone looking at these next few days?
I think a sneaky one is that Kansas City-Minnesota series, right? The Royals have been better than expected, and Minnesota has just now climbed back to the top of this division. It's one that I think everybody thought was a 2-team race. I still think it's a 2-team race, but what happens if Kansas City goes and sweeps Minnesota? Like, where do they go? You know, they've never been aggressive buyers and wanted to quick react. But 2 months in, almost, you kind of got to take your shot if you're still in the picture at some point, right? What do they do if they end up sweeping Minnesota here? That's unlikely, but it's just fun to think about these kind of things.
They do get the 3-4-5 of the Minnesota rotation. Looks like Coleman, Rivaldi, and Sampson lined up. Jeffrey Hoover could be heading to the DL, another injury to the Twins bullpen. It is an interesting series. As far as Houston goes, a big win tonight against Seattle. What's the outlook for the rest of the series pitching-wise for the Astros?
Well, that might be our only win against Seattle this entire season. They've absolutely had our number so far, and I hate seeing them on the schedule. I mean, there's a chance that we might see Juan Davila make his major league debut in the next couple days. I'm still toying with it. The issue is I don't know where to fit him in the rotation right now. Is Pat Crosby has been fantastic in this follower role that I've been using him in the last couple days. I can't force that out. And while Melvin Garner and Tim and Will Rainey and Dave Groves and Tim James haven't quite pitched to where I expect them to. I mean, Garner was one of the better pitchers in MLB Pro last year, pitching to 2.92 ERA. I mean, he's at a 7.7 now, but I can't reasonably take that out of the rotation just yet. So it might be something maybe try and deal an arm here in the next few weeks, and then get Davila up here. We think that he's our future number one. But for the time being, it's hope that Pat Crosby continues his strong run against the Angels and Mariners over the last few years.
Pat Crosby's been fantastic, and even Melvin Gardner, as you pointed out. Outside of, I think the right word is inconsistent. He had a great start against Seattle yesterday, a bad start against Seattle last week, which was the week before that. It was a good start against Oakland, and then a bad start against Tampa. So he's up and down, but when he's good, he's good. When he's bad, he's bad. And as you pointed out, a great season last year. You do, it looks like, run into the dynamic duo of Holson and Bundy this weekend, which is never a fun experience for opposing batters. What else can we talk about? Anything else itching anyone's interest?
I was trying to get Sam to speak up about the Dodgers start. I know that was one of the big questions. Like, what the hell happened out west with? Oh, he actually said he'd speak up to it. So the Dodgers were a team that I think everybody thought would compete in the National League West, and they've just fallen off. Like, I'd love to hear Sam's take on where his team is and where he's going to go with it.
Am I able to be heard?
We hear you, Sam. Let's hear it.
What's up? Well, I can tell you that Juan Soto's been pretty disappointing.
Yeah,
after the start he had last year.
I mean, if he's available.
3, 4, and 5.
Yeah, I'll take him.
3, 4, and 5 have been rough. That includes De Leon as well as Profar. And then besides that, I would say the issue has been the bullpen. Let me look at it real quick. The bullpen has a 6.15 ERA on the year. I'm not quite panicking yet, but I'm 10 games below 500, right? So, and with the Diamondbacks, it's tough. So I'm going to be patient, before selling the farm or selling the team at all. I actually did trade Roberto Lopez earlier this week, and that really had to do with his dissatisfaction on the bench and me thinking it's somehow contributing to our losing. And the piece I got back there was Mike Ciani. I don't know if you guys have taken a look at him.
Not yet. No, I have not.
Yeah, but really like him. I think he's got Gold Glove potential. The bats, I think, enough to be a star in this league. So, yeah, really hoping this thing turns around soon. This weekend, I'm facing, let's see, the
San Diego.
Padres. Yeah, the Padres. That's coming off 2 wins in a row versus the Cubs.
Might we see Julio Urias at some point here in the near future, perhaps maybe experimenting in the bullpen?
I don't necessarily think so. To give out a secret, my scout's not all that high on him anymore.
Here come the trade offers, man. Like they're gonna flying in tomorrow.
3, 2, 1.
Yeah. And Mitch is in your inbox. Done.
Yeah. I think a guy maybe to watch down at AAA is Connor Pilkington. I think Matt inquired on him, or at least asked about him.
Mm-hmm. I did at one point. I know that much.
As you pointed out, Sam, I mean, you're just looking at your rotation. John Lester's been fantastic. Jared Kozart's been fantastic. Josh Tomlin's been good. Parker Markle's been fantastic. I mean, your starting pitching's been there, and then the loss of Sergio Romo certainly doesn't help.
Yeah, that was rough, I would say. But thankfully, I didn't give up much to acquire him. And then also Cruzado has been fairly disappointing. And then look at the production of my catchers. It's god awful. And I think that's bound to change as well.
Juan Carlos Estrada hitting a nice 128 for you in 78 at-bats, with Logan Moore hitting a little bit better at 167. So
yeah,
I think to say you're not getting production out of your catchers is a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, and let's see. I would say that's pretty much why it's gone awry so far. Probably I'm trying to think of who I would potentially sell down the road, but I'm gonna wait until the time comes, honestly.
I would hope from a National League side of things that the Dodgers turn it around. They're one of the few teams we have that have the talent to make a run in the playoffs, right? You think about the Rockies, the Mets, the Dodgers, the Cardinals, the Reds, right? There's a couple of teams out there that, like, us as National League romantics just cling to for dear fucking life. And I think the Dodgers are one of those teams. So, you know, from a National League GM to another one, I hope to God your team turns it around, man.
Who is the biggest threat?
I absolutely love the Diamondbacks. I think.
Yeah, they're killer.
Yeah, I think. And they still have Jeffrey Stone down at AAA.
He's gonna be a monster when he comes
up. He needs to be called up.
He's coming up soon. I think he's coming up. You know, you've got Parker on the waivers right now. I don't think anybody claims him, but I do think Jeffrey Stone, to your point, is up within the month.
I think he's up within the week. I mean, we just passed the point where you get a full year's service time, extra team control. I mean, my scout is absolutely in love with him already and thinks that there's still more to go. So, unless if that's sitting around saying, I'm waiting until he hits full potential, which maybe that's the move. I mean, his team's rocking and rolling in first place right now, so maybe you hold on to what you've got, but I think you got to get him up there sometime soon.
It's so scary. They're so good right now with him, with Vlad Guerrero, with Juan Moran, all in AAA, like literally almost ready to make this jump. They could be ridiculous in the National League for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Bold prediction is they're the first national team to win a series.
Fuck, I love it.
So maybe not for a couple of years then.
That is depressing, yes. But, I mean, it's hard to argue, right? Like, the Mets are great, but, I mean, my apologies, Bruce. Like, is this Mets team going to win a World Series? No. There's no way. The National League East is a joke right now. There's no way this Mets team wins a World Series. The Cardinals, for whatever reason, can't figure their own shit out. The Rockies I love, but, like, again, I don't know. I can't see them being the team that does it. So maybe you're right. Maybe we have to wait till the Diamondbacks are ready. But I think when they do, it's gonna be a fucking dynasty, and then we're all kind of in the same situation. But I don't know.
The 1-2 pairing of Vega and Lincecum give the Mets a chance.
Yep.
Yeah, that's fair.
On that note, we are hitting the Zoom limit here any second now. So before we get cut off, I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Brenton, continue to bust everyone's chops and get these going more often because they are fantastic, as are your shorter clips. Those are must listen for everyone. So let's hop back on here in a couple of days and go over what the latest news in MLB Pro is. But until next time, thank you everyone for joining us here.
Thanks for organizing, man.
All right.
Nice.